The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
I'm back. Al Clark is here. We await Peter Golenbach. I'm Ralph Tyko, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And Al, welcome back to the network. First time.
Thanks, Ralph. It's good to be back with you guys.
Yeah, well, you know, you're a Trenton, New Jersey guy, and you've been on with George Case the third, and you go back to the days of Trenton. And for those of you out here who don't know, Trenton is kind of a hub in baseball, kind of one of the most famous minor league teams. And can you give me some history of that, Al Clark?
Well, back in the back in the day when baseball had minor leagues in many, many more cities than they do now, when they had not only Class A, AA, and AAA, but they had B, C, D leagues. And it seemed like if anybody could play at all back in the day, they were given some kind of contract. And Trenton was a B League team. It was in the what they call the Interstate League. It involved New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey and Delaware, I believe, and then down into Maryland for sure. And it was a B League team, and some great folks went through there. Willie Mays went through the Trenton Giants, as they were called then.
Or he went up to Minneapolis.
You know, and yeah, he came from Birmingham to Trenton, and then Trenton to Minneapolis, I believe, the Minneapolis Miners. And yeah, Trenton has been, I mean, the history of the Trenton players are, you know, very, very big. Bo Belinsky, who had a no-hitter with the California Angels back in the day.
Yes.
Al Downing, of course, who was an all-star and led the American League in strikeouts 1 year, played with the Yankees, played with the Oakland A's, played with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and of course is infamous for giving up Henry Aaron's 715th home run down in one of the old Atlanta stadiums, Fulton County Stadium. And Wayne Krenchicki more recently, and Sonny Pitaro's boy. I mean, there's a lot of good Trenton players that came from Trenton, New Jersey, that matriculated. Steve Braun.
Now, I met him in the minors. He was supposed to be the next third baseman with Detroit, the coming guy, and he went on to a career as a minor league manager and player development guy. If I'm not mistaken, he's still with the Oakland A's.
Well, he might be, but it doesn't surprise me that he became a manager because his dad, of course, coached at Rider College and now Rider University for a lot of years and was quite successful. Good baseball man. Played on a national championship American Legion team, I believe. The Trenton Schroets, Sonny Pitaro did. My goodness gracious, Stevie Braun. Steve Braun also played, you know, he played in Minnesota and Seattle and St. Louis from Hopewell, which is right outside Trenton, New Jersey.
Okay. Now, when you grew up, those of you out there, I didn't give you a proper introduction. Al was the first American League umpire of the Jewish faith. Me a Jew.
Well, actually, Ralph, I was the first and only ever Jewish umpire hired by the American League, and that distinction will last forever because no longer are the umpires hired by either the American League or National League. They're hired by the commissioner's office. So I will forever be known as the first and only Jewish umpire hired by the American League.
So, in essence, now what you're saying is that because the Major League hires the umpires and is kind of in control of their training and what what have you, that there is no distinction as there used to be. One league was a high ball league, one because of the outside.
Well, that's a figment. That's primarily a figment of the writers and broadcasters' imagination. A strike was a strike. There was a little different mechanics used when the American League umpires used what we call the outside chest protector, as opposed to the National League using the inside chest protector. When I got to the big leagues, the outside chest protector was being grandfathered out, and I never used an outside chest protector in the big leagues.
You did in the
when I came back from Venezuela, I used an inside chest protector. I learned how to use the outside chest protector when I went to Venezuela for 2 years, and my contract had been the option on my contract had been bought by the American League, and I figured I'd better learn how to use the outside chest protector because that's what I was going to use. But then just before I got to the big leagues, they decided to grandfather it out. Now, of course, everybody wears an inside chest protector.
A strike is a strike. But did the outside protector force you to either get down lower or make some adjustments in the way you call it?
Well, no, there was no adjustment made. It was just a different mechanic. The inside chest protector, the guys in the National League would work over the left and right shoulder of the catchers, and the American League guys, because of the outside chest protector, would work directly over his head. And that would give you a little different perception from behind the plate of what the strike zone was.
Okay.
So there was not a difference in...
More accurate perception?
No, there was not a difference in... It gave you a little different perception of what the strike zone was, whether you're looking at it from over a catcher's shoulder or over his head. You might see it just a tad differently. There was, that's what created the opinion of there was an American League and National League strike zone, but in essence, that was not the case because everybody saw the strike kind of differently, but in the same area, the same box.
Okay. And was there ever an umpire that went from one league to another back in the day?
Oh, I think there was. I don't remember. I think there was either one or two guys that did that, but it was like back in the 20s and 30s, and it was before. It was before there were four umpires on the field, and the American League and National League acted very independently. And there was at the time, Ralph, there was if the National League wanted an American League umpire, they could go and negotiate with him on an individual basis. And today, of course, that cannot happen. Well, it would not happen because everybody's under the same auspices of the commissioner's office.
But in the 60s or 70s, for instance.
No, way before then. Way before then.
Okay.
It wasn't until into the middle 50s.
There was never a time when, in the time you were growing up, let's say, and me too, we're about the same age, when umpires, and big announcement, Augie Donatelli goes from one league to another. That never happened.
No, it didn't. It did a long time before Augie. I'm talking about the 20s and 30s.
Okay.
Not in the 60s and 70s.
Was the pay scale when you umped different of that of an American League umpire from a National League umpire? Just the pays.
When I worked, no, because we're all under the Major League Umpires Association at that time. So we were paid on a seniority basis. If you worked X number of years, you were paid X number of dollars. And that's still the case. But that didn't occur until the Major League Umpires Association came into existence. And that wasn't until into the 60s. And that was way before my time.
Oh, so you guys were negotiating independent contracts and what have you?
Yes, we certainly were.
Wow, that had to make it very difficult.
Sure it was. It was very difficult. That's why it was imperative that the umpires, got a union. And a fellow by the name of Bill Valentine and Al Salerno were two of the umpires that created that situation and started the Umpires Association.
Who those guys were and how they went about getting the umpires in unison, in brotherhood, if you will.
Well, the National League had the National League Union, and they were separate from the American League Union. Bill Valentine and Al Salerno, there was some retribution from the American League when those guys started the union. And actually, Bill Valentine later on, after I don't remember exactly, or I don't know exactly how he was dismissed from the American League, but he later became a minor league general manager. And when I was going through the minor leagues in the Texas League, he was the general manager of the Arkansas Travelers in Little Rock, Arkansas.
May I ask you a question? I know that Jim Haller, after his umpiring career, went into play.
No, that's Bill Haller.
Bill Haller.
That's Bill Haller.
You're absolutely correct. Bill Haller went into scouting with the White Sox, the Yankees a little bit. You don't hear of much of that.
No, that was Tom Haller.
No,
Ralph, you got him wrong. There was Bill Haller and Tom Haller were brothers. Tom Haller was a player. Bill Haller was the umpire. Tom Haller was the catcher. He later became a general manager of the San Francisco Giants, and then a scout for some of the teams that you said.
But Bill Haller also did some scouting and player development work after he stopped umpiring for the White Sox.
No, that's not accurate. What he did was he did some umpire supervision work for the American League.
Okay.
He was never a player scout. Tom Haller was the player scout.
Absolutely, he was, and he did become general manager. But one of my co-hosts on this show was Timmy Haller, Tom's son, and Jim's nephew.
No, yeah, Tom's son. Yep.
And
I know
Bill's
Tim.
nephew.
Correct.
And we had Jim on, and I think the conversation between the two of them had something to do with Timmy's minor league career and his uncle in the front office with the White Sox and or the Yankees at one time or another. If I'm wrong, you're the first guy I'll call and apologize to, because I'm accountable for all of this. But I wonder if you had considered scouting. I can't imagine someone as an umpire. You talked once when you were on the air of things you look for in a baseball game, and if somebody sits down and watches a baseball game with you, they'll learn a whole hell of a lot. And I'm sure that would transcend into scouting and what have you. Would you give me a little synopsis of what it would be like to sit down with Al Clark and at a baseball game, and what would I learn? What would you teach me to watch for?
Well, I would look for the things that I saw while I was working on the field. I would look for the intensity in a player, whether his body language was reticent, whether his body language was aggressive. I would look to see how he moves and what his attention span was or is on defense. I would see how he correlates with the rest of his team. If the center fielder is shading hitters to the left, would the second baseman be more up the middle or more to the first base side? There are people that are paid a lot of money to tell pitchers where to pitch to hitters in hopes that hitters hit where they are, their strengths or weaknesses, and the defense against it. And I don't believe the everyday fan might notice that. As an umpire, I noticed it all the time, especially if I was working second base. I would watch and see where the center fielder was shading a hitter, and I would, quote, cheat left or right, so I could be in a little bit better position to perhaps get a better angle on a shoestring catch or no catch.
Now,
so there are many things.
Let me ask you this. Which players in the time that you umpired had the skills that you just talked about, being able to anticipate, being able to move a step in advance?
Oh, Ralph, these guys are so good. Yeah, there's not one guy. There's a myriad of guys. I mean, they don't get to the big leagues because by happenstance. I mean, there wasn't a more intelligent player on the field than Cal Ripken Jr. I mean, he grew up with his dad, although not necessarily a great manager. He was a great teacher, and he was the originator of what later became the Oriole way, whereas everybody did everything the same way from Class A in the Oriole organization right up to the big leagues. And Alan Trammell was tremendous, and Lou Whitaker was tremendous, and you should see Kirby Puckett in the outfield, or Ken Griffey Jr. in the outfield. These guys were so good and so in tune with what was going on the pitcher's mound and in the batter's box when they were in the outfield. And they are things that people, baseball fans, if you haven't been on the field in the big leagues, you just don't have a concept of how good these guys are. There's a reason they're good. There's a reason they make these fantastic plays. It's because they're prepared.
Have you seen an improvement in skills from the time you started umpiring till today?
In the players?
Yeah.
I think the players. I don't know. I cannot. I think it's a fruitless argument to argue generation to generation. I can't compare Babe Ruth to Mark McGwire to Giancarlo Stanton. I think the different eras should be compared to themselves. Has the equipment gotten better? Yes. Has the metrics system gotten better? Of course it has. I think that the game loses something by not having the scouts or the people in baseball eyeball a guy and tell you about him rather than perhaps an egghead with a computer just computerizing, making this human being into computered numbers. I think it's got to be a combination. There are variables. Both. Well, for sure, as things evolve, it certainly should be. But I think that the variables that are involved that you cannot see in the computer from the numbers on the computer, things like pressure, things like a 2-1 ball game or a 9-3 ball game. Is it the second inning or the ninth inning? I think all those things are variables that come into play in every game, every situation, and every player reacts differently to it, regardless of what his numbers say. Okay. You can't look into a player's heart. It's very difficult to do that if you're just all metrics. So there has to be a way of communicating with the kid and finding out as much as possible about him, as well as the pure numbers. And then again, there's that projecting in the future. You see a 19-year-old kid, 18, 19-year-olds, how's his body going to be at 25, at 30? Well, that's why you need the scouts, and the scouts are an integral part of the professional baseball scene. These guys are, they're baseball lifers, many of them. They've been players. They know what goes on the field. They talk to a guy and they know if he's going to be able to go back to the hotel when the neons go on or not.
Al, I've talked to a lot of players about how they handle the first year of retirement when they're no longer having that competition going on every day. And from talking to you over these past months, I realized that there's that same competition to call every play right and get the game right and teamwork with your other fellow umpires and all of that. How did you handle that lack of, every day, every evening, 3 o'clock, the lack of adrenaline, your wheels are going?
Well, for an umpire, it's a whole lot different because, we're on the road for 7 months a year. We don't have a home base. And for us to come home and be a part of our home stage, so to speak, is a whole lot different than a player. We're glad to be home. When our careers are over, we're glad to go home. Players have home bases. Umpires do not. If a player moves to Los Angeles and he's from Chicago or anywhere else, he's going to be in Los Angeles for half the season, so he's only on the road for 3 months, and that's intermittent. Umpires are on the road for 7 months a year, and except for vacation time that we earn through collective bargaining, we don't go home. So going home in the wintertime and going home when your career is over, not too many umpires go back to baseball games just to watch. It comes under the category of been there and done that. Not to say that we don't love the game, because I certainly do.
What are some of the things
it's not,
that you were happy to go back to, like in the summer, that you didn't experience for years and years? Just the American way, growing up.
The 4th of July picnic?
Good example.
The 4th of July picnic with friends and family? Golf tournaments at whatever club I was a member of. Family events all summer long. We missed all those things. Little League games, Babe Ruth League games. They were not part of our lexicon.
And, there's no one rooting for you either. You're out there on the road, and it's not like a player walks down the street, hey, Mickey Mantle's coming to town. That you're an umpire. You're pretty much nondescript in the city, the way you want to be. You don't want to stand out.
Well, you'd be surprised, Ralph. I walk down cities all over the country, and baseball fans recognize me as I go out and walk, and they recognize many of the umpires as they go out for walks during the daytime. We're not as nondescript as you might think to the baseball fan, and we're not the scourged individual as you might think. That is also a figment of the writers and broadcasters' imagination. And when the writers and broadcasters talk about rules, it's the most funniest thing you'd ever want to hear, because they have no idea what the hell they're talking about in many, many situations. You talk about a play that happens on the field that has to do with interference or obstruction. The announcers have no idea which is which and how it occurs and what happens when. And a batting out of order, as they had in Cincinnati just the other day. I listened to like 3 or 4 different sets of announcers. I listened to 3 or 4 sets of announcers, and they all said something different. They had no idea what the hell they were talking about. Now, there's that kind of thing kind of gets to me, because they're so-called professionals, but yet they want to talk about knowing about what the umpires do, how they do it, when they do it, their dedication, and when in fact they have no idea in reality what they're talking about.
Wow. You know, you'd be a great analyst.
I don't understand how the MLB network. I was just talking to Danny Plesick about this at a golf tournament in New Jersey, a celebrity tournament in New Jersey. How MLB doesn't hire a retired umpire, not me necessarily, but a retired umpire to go to when there's a controversy on the field. The NFL does it in their telecasts. The NBA does it in their telecasts. How Major League Baseball doesn't do it, I just don't understand. Not Major League Baseball. How Major League Baseball, the networks don't do it.
They dropped the ball on that, but let me say where they really picked up the ball. They hired Billy Ripken, who is Cal Ripken's younger brother. And it's my contention that a utility guy picks up an awful lot more about fundamentals, this, that, than a superstar. Cal's probably the exception, being raised by the same dad who is coach. But Billy is so good and so descriptive on the MLB channel.
I think all those guys are very good on the MLB's channel. I think the personalities that they've got are outstanding. But notice that very, very few of them, the players, they talk about the rules because they know they don't know the rules. Now, some of the writers might think they know about the rules, and they don't. They kind of make themselves look bad. In reality, no matter how loud they may say they know the rules, seldom do they actually get it right and interpretation correct. But the players don't talk about the rules because they know they don't know the rules. But the baseball side of it, these guys are great. These guys, Al Leiter does a tremendous job. Billy does a tremendous job. Harold Reynolds does a tremendous job. Jim Thome does a tremendous. These guys know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to playing baseball.
No question.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. Al, your dad was a writer, and you end up writing a book. How ironic is that?
Well, that's how I know that writers don't know what they're talking about.
Is he spinning it around with that statement? Or was he one of the writers that did know what he was talking about? Are you with me? Uh-oh. I think I lost you. Hello. Hello, Al Clark. All right, we're going to take a little pause and see if Al comes back. I'm going to push the button, take a break, and give you a little bumper music. I'm back. Al Clark isn't. I called him at home. He can't get a line. He was disconnected. So we're going to leave the interview as is and continue it at another time real shortly. Thank you, Al Clark. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko. And thank you for listening, everybody. Adios. We are back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, and right down the road from Berkeley, where my guest, my friend, my compadre, Howie Rose lives. There's a world of difference between Alameda and Berkeley, and it's not the architecture, which is very similar. It's not the terrain, which equally beautiful. It's the mindset of the folks. And I noticed living in Northern California that you go from town to town, and there's an incredibly eclectic group of folks. How do you picture Northern California? How long have you been here? 20 years?
I came here with flowers in my hair in 1968.
Wow.
I was working with street gangs in San Francisco. I did that for 6 months, went back to the East Coast to working in poverty programs, came back the next summer again where I stayed at a commune as a guest for a while in Berkeley. I went back to the East Coast, got my clothes in my car, broke up with my girlfriend, quit my job, and moved to the commune in Berkeley in 1971. Been here ever since.
Wow.
In fact, I now own the house that was the commune. I feel like Joseph Stalin.
You know, it's funny that there are people, New Yorkers, I'm a native New Yorker, you're from Pittsburgh, Easterners, Northeasterners in particular, that find it incredibly difficult to leave the digs that they were raised in, the familiarity, the fear of whatever it is, the unknown gets them. But I find there are a lot of people that look back in life and say, oh, I wish I'd have done it. I wish I'd have retired here. I wish I'd have done this, that, and the other thing. You and I share this. We'll never, at the end, whenever it comes, I hope it's a long time, we'll never say, I wish I would have done it differently. No, you take your shot at it. You take your best shot, and as my old friend David Hirsch would say, you do the best you can, and you live with the results. And I get a feeling that you're along the same lines in your way you're thinking.
Well, given the generation gap that was happening when I came of age, and given the fact that I leapt into it, I loved the counterculture. I loved the sex. I loved the drugs. I loved the politics, and those. That order of importance vacillated, which was number one on my dial at any given time. But I could not have lived a life pursuing those things in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh was very backwater in terms of the revolution that was happening. New York wasn't, and nor Boston or even D.C., but Pittsburgh was. And if I had tried to be the person I wanted to be in Pittsburgh, it would have been severe conflict with my family that I did not want to promote. So I headed west, and no hesitation whatsoever. I could live the life I wanted to live, and did. In fact, one of the, in preparing to talk to you this morning I got up and I was thinking, well, what can I offer this show? And I came up with two ideas. One of them is a piece called "Let My People Go." And it's a theme. It's along the theme of two Jews, three opinions. That was sort of like a subtext of our relationship at this point. So I think I'm leaning toward that. The other piece is called "Bricks Without Straw: The Debatably Awesome Adventures of the Bad News Jews." The Bad News Jews was a softball team that I managed in my 40s for the Temple Bethel over here, and I wrote a book about that year. I think we'll save that one for another day, and if you'll indulge me, let me read you "Let My People Go." It's about 5 minutes, and it certainly will create a lot of opinions. You go with that?
Beautiful.
Trust me on this?
I'd love to hear it, and maybe we could do the baseball one on the radio show that we're producing here at Comfortably Zoned. It debuts next Thursday, and it is on Sports Byline USA, Sports Overnight America, and it's on 200 different outlets, Sirius FM, United Airlines,
Wow.
Armed Forces Radio. We're all over the world, literally international. And I'd love to have you come on and read that one day.
Well, we'll have to talk about that off stage to see if it's appropriate. But yeah, I'd like to. I'd like to see that this book have a life and get it out there. But in the meantime, here's this one. Let My People Go, An Open Letter to the Jews of the World by Howie Gordon, one of them. Quote, a Palestinian bomber blew himself up in an inner-city bus station near Hadera, Israel, on Thursday night, killing 3 Israelis and wounding 9 more. Unquote. From the New York Times, November 30th, 2001, 17 years ago. Pretty ho-hum in the year 2001 it was. They killed some of ours, we killed some of theirs. Modern life. It hardly makes you look up from your morning coffee anymore. Oops, I'm late for work, gotta run. I was born a week before Israel, in the spring of 1948. I have spent an entire lifetime worrying about the survival of the modern-day Jewish state. I've grown weary. I'm sick of it. And perhaps like Begin and Sadat before me, I would love to see this undying Middle Eastern crisis finally resolved before I leave this good earth. That said, it has somehow come to me to begin thinking of the previously unthinkable. Before I go on, understand that I'm aware that the logic inherent in the heresy I'm about to suggest you consider might be very particular to the mentality of an American Jew, a New World Jew, if you will. But then so be it. The old world solutions don't seem to be working, do they? And all people everywhere in the world recognize that the time comes in life when the children need to become the parents to their elders. So here's some thinking from the New World. In America, Christians, Jews, Muslims, and all the other religions of the world for that matter, get along. It may not be all peanut butter and jelly all the time, but I mean, we do have some evangelical Christians that it's time to see stuff back in their cages, but basically by word of law, we do get along. Would that the old world embrace this notion of religious tolerance, and we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion. But given that things are the way they are, my fellow Jews of the world, what I'm saying in regards to the fate of Israel is that it's time to move. We have become again in bondage in the state of Israel, only this time it is to the gods of war. Blow the shofar, my friend, and get Charlton Heston on the horn, because what I'm suggesting to you is that it's time for another Exodus. Pack up your Torahs, boys, because I propose we put up a for sale sign in Tel Aviv, and that we do it now, while we're still bargaining from a position of strength, and begin looking around for a new place to live. When our 20th century ancestors first began arriving in America, they moved into the lousy slum neighborhoods previously occupied by earlier immigrants like the Italians and the Irish. When those folks got their footing in America, they moved out of those neighborhoods, as we did too once we unraveled the red, white, and blue mysteries of Yankee Doodle Dandy. It's true that in a miracle of history, we gave rebirth to a Jewish homeland in the state of Israel. But after 50, now 70, horrifying years there, I'm only stating the obvious to observe that the neighborhood really stinks. It's got issues far worse than waking up every morning to discover that your tires have been slashed. Yes, we've been there 70 years. But how long must we continue to hit our heads on the wall? And at what price to ourselves and to the rest of the world? Besides, what's 70 years in the Hebrew calendar? It's nothing. It's a blink. It's time we looked for a better neighborhood. I know this is a many-oi thing. In fact, it's a multiple orgasm. But God damn it, after 5,000 years, we deserve a better fate than this. You want to be the chosen people again? Well, choose this. Let's move. The Jews have an opportunity here at this point to step up and show the entire human race how it's done. Nothing like this has ever happened before in recorded history. Ever. We could help to usher in an unprecedented era of what might prove to be 1,000 years of peace on earth. And all by moving to a better neighborhood. You know, it was a noble idea, full of a generous tzedakah, charity in English, in addition to whatever else their motivations were for the victorious allies of World War II to support the idea of a Jewish homeland when our people had just suffered so much tragedy at the hands of Mr. Hitler. But come on, after all the wars, terrorist attacks, bloodbaths, and living under the sort of Damocles tensions for the last 70 years, maybe it's time we just face the fact that sticking our new Israel right in the middle of Palestine wasn't such a good idea after all. Is it possible for us to reconsider that the Allies and our Zionist predecessors just picked the wrong goddamn neighborhood for this Jewish reunion? Jews of compassion and common sense have spent a lifetime being compromised by the injustice initially done to the Palestinians by Israel's creation. And the Palestinians have not exactly gone quietly into that good night. The unsavory and largely unspeakable fact of real politic is that when the Jews initially won their independence in 1948, they stopped short of the necessary genocide of the Palestinians to eradicate what has become 4 generations of an international blood feud. When the European flotsam and jetsam that became the Americans and Canadians and such conquered the native inhabitants of North, Central, and South America, whether by design or just the random cruelty of human nature, they left no doubt as to who had become and who would remain the masters of the land. And thus far, since Geronimo has laid down his weapons, the Apache Liberation Front has not offered much of an ongoing threat to the well-being or security of the United States. Obviously, it is not so with the Palestinians, who have continued to garner the support of the entire Muslim world in their struggle to wrest from the Israelis what was so recently their own. Sure come the arguments that there was an Israel before there was a Palestine. And who exactly did we steal it from the first time around? The Canaanites? Hell, when Rabbi Jesus roamed the earth, it was Judea, and it was controlled by the Romans. Maybe we should just give the whole place back to Italy. At this point, Israeli-Palestinian issue is one far beyond legalisms of right and wrong, and the atrocities visited by each upon the other cancel each other out. We humans have a might makes right history, and this current version of Israel has survived only because the Jews there, with the support of the United States, have managed to maintain the bigger stick. But at what price and for how long? We've created an Israeli people that hears dog whistles in their sleep. I'm telling you, the neighborhood stinks. You know, spiritually speaking, putting aside the myriad calamities of having to survive 2,000 years as a minority within various cultures, both hospitable and I'm not entirely convinced that the reformation of a Jewish state was a step in the right direction to begin with. In biblical speak, consider this. Just what was God trying to teach the Jews by having orchestrated their original eviction from the Holy Land at the hands of the Romans? I'm not one generally given to burning bushes, but I swear I could hear Jehovah whispering, "It's not about the land. It's not about land. I am the Lord your God, and thou shalt have no other gods before me. Not idols made of stone, nor countries made of land, not money, not thy neighbor's ass, not Jolson, Crosby, Sinatra, Elvis, or even Barbra Streisand. Life is a temp job at best. You don't own the earth. You get born and you get to dwell on it for a little while. You try to have more good days than bad, and then you die. You return to eternity, where if you're lucky, I'll tell you who killed Kennedy. You don't own the land any more than the dinosaurs did before you. Didn't I prove it to you? Israel is a state of mind. Where are the Romans? Where are the Carthaginians? They had all the land. They didn't survive. But 2,000 years later, the Jews are still making chopped liver. Didn't that teach you anything? It's hard to deal with God when she gets on a rant. And given the world's history of pogroms, crusades, inquisitions, and early risers like Mr. Hitler, it makes you wonder if God has a boss. One would like to appeal to a higher authority. In any case, God's contradictions notwithstanding, it's hard to find fault with the Jews for wanting their own place to call home. Our conventional wisdom states that gods help those who help themselves. So, just for the sake of argument, why don't we put our macho and our willingness to die for God and country on hold for just a moment and consider if there isn't a way to live toward a decent solution. Here's what I propose. Number one, the Jews move out of Israel. A few hundred years ago, there was only the old York. Now there's a New York. At this point in time, where would you rather live, York or New York? We begin thinking about a new Israel. Number two, the people of Israel will have to come up with a number. What it would be worth to sell the land of Israel back to the Palestinians and their supporters. Given the billions spent annually on armaments alone, my guess is that every family in Israel, though it is hardly the point, could come out of this as millionaires. Number three, we enlist the United Nations to broker a deal for the new Israel. We have them find some land, preferably on the other side of the world from the Palestinians, that is roughly the geographic equivalent of the old homestead. And we make sure that the current owners would either be happy to sell us the land or be only too willing to create some kind of mutual, beneficial, active partnership with the Jewish people. The hope here is that there are any number of third world countries on the wrong side of the Nike equation who might be eager to improve their impoverished lot on the planet by entering into such a deal. We require that the UN come up with at least 3 different choices, and then we go shopping. Number 4, the United Nations headquarters is moved from New York City to Jerusalem. Like the District of Columbia, which houses Washington, D.C., Jerusalem and its immediate supporting environs will become an independent international city under the protection of the United Nations. In effect, Jerusalem will become the capital of the world, with its borders and shrines eternally open to all. Number 5, Jews who do not wish to emigrate with Israel will be given permission to stay behind, provided they're willing to live as a minority culture within the Palestinian state to be established. Number 6, the holy sites of Judaism outside of Jerusalem will be maintained by the new Palestinian state, and Jews will be allowed to visit. You don't have to conquer France to enjoy the Eiffel Tower. You just need access. Number 7, this agreement, whatever its final form, will settle all claims, past and present, between Israel and Palestine. But you've never even been to Israel, argued my tennis partner, the brainy and progressive Rabbi Shortstop, who has himself a Reformed congregation near San Francisco. That's right, I said to him, and these days I don't want to go there. Next year in Jerusalem sounds like the booby prize. I'd much prefer 2 weeks in Maui. Hey, maybe Jews should just buy back Hawaii from the Japanese and move there. Can you put poi on matzah? You don't understand, the rabbi said. Israel's a magical place. These people will never leave there. And he may well be right, but never, as they say, is a long time. And it was one of our own heavy hitters, little Albie Einstein, who once said, "For an idea that does not at first seem insane, there is no hope." The good Rabbi Shortstop argued that it was a waste of my time to work on things that will never happen. But when he suggested that we should be working on ways to figure out how the Israelis and Palestinians can learn to live with each other, I thought, now who's wasting their time working on things that will never happen? Without an Alexander the Great forcing them to intermarry at sword's point to forever blur their distinctions, I don't see it happening. I'm more a fan of the ancient Sufi wisdom that recognizes that the lion and the polar bear cannot fight. I say we move to the Pacific side of things and look back on a world where the truly brave man has run from the battlefield and bestowed upon the world the precious gift of peace. But they'll think they've won, argued my rabbi buddy. Let them. It will be a win-win situation. It will be a win for everybody. The whole world will dance, and they'll have the Jews to thank for it. Even now, while the Israeli government is busy delivering its latest ultimatum to Yasser Arafat, along with a few well-aimed missiles, after another bloody weekend where 3 different Palestinian suicide bombers killed over 25 Israelis and wounded dozens more, maybe our next Moses is growing up somewhere in Israel with this strange idea in his head that all this madness has to stop. Maybe he's thinking, let my people go.
Well, Terrific, Howie. Very well written. Thank you. Howie.
Yeah, I'm here. My pleasure.
It was wonderful.
My madness.
It's not madness, only in the sense that you think that the Jews might have chosen Israel or Palestine as a place to go. It was chosen for them. No one in Europe wanted them, wanted us. So we really didn't have a choice.
Well, at the time, there was talk of relocating the Jews in Uganda, making Uganda the place for the Jewish state. And the Zionists involved wanted Palestine. I mean, there was a time before it was all decided where options were considered.
Okay, was there a melding of the Orthodox religion that considers Jerusalem the High Holy Land, as does two other major religions, and was it the stubbornness that came about over that, like we'd be giving up the High Holy Land?
I don't really have the knowledge to authoritatively comment on that. I'm just I'm a fan sitting in right field watching the game.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it would cause peace, what you're saying would be great. I always had the idea that you can move all the Nebraskans to Kansas. It still wouldn't be crowded. Move the Jews to Kansas. Move the Jews to Nebraska. And it would be nice. You'd have...
If the Mormons could have Utah, you figured, what the hell, the Jews can get something. At least New Jersey.
Absolutely. It would increase the average IQ in Nebraska. It wouldn't change things in Kansas whatsoever.
Well, they'd be eating more schmaltz.
Well, they would, but there'd be some assimilation, and they'd know what it feels like to assimilate.
There's quite a Jewish community in Kansas City.
There is. Lawrence, Kansas has indeed quite a Jewish community, as does Pittsburgh. Am I correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And all the cities, Detroit, Pittsburgh. There's always a Jewish neighborhood and a number of temples in the big cities.
Identify the rabbi that you play tennis with, if you would.
Dan Goldblatt.
Yeah.
He's at Bethel in Danville now.
He's a progressive in this here world.
Very much.
Yeah.
And the best shortstop I ever saw, especially for a Jew. I was astonished to see him play ball. He's a really good athlete. Good athlete.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll go back to my youth, and I played softball at Kittatinny Camp, and Hoagie Bach was the shortstop of my day, and I'd like to acknowledge him. He was Cal Ripken before Cal Ripken, big, tall, rangy, and what have you. Yeah, Jews can play some ball. There's no question about that. Not only Sandy Koufax, not only Hank Greenberg, but there's 5 or 6 Jews playing in today's game. None come to mind except the third baseman Bergman on Houston, who was so terrific in the World Series. We got Jews in the major leagues, and we have assimilated, and I don't think there's going to be much of an uproar in Israel to move the Jews out. If it would bring peace already, if you look at it that way, enough is enough.
When this article, I don't know where I printed it, I circulated it when I wrote it, and like I said, 2001, and I actually got a letter from a member of the Israeli Knesset their House of Representatives kind of group, and they said this is an interesting idea, but I hope you won't publicize it because it'll give our enemies comfort.
Yeah, but if you're looking at it from that standpoint, rather than, it's like Golda Meir said when she was alive about the Arabs hating the Jews more than they love their kids. You could find a reversal to that. Would it matter? Do we care about what our enemies think if it would do better for us as a society? And you could put those words into any group of folks anywhere.
Yeah, well, it's the pragmatism that especially I think appeals to the American mind, because we can all, within this last century, identify with the slums and how the immigrants came to the slums to get out of where they were, and then they fell into the American dream and got out. And I feel very similar that the same consciousness would enable the Jews to move to a better neighborhood. It's just that simple. It's a kind of like a prism. You just shine the light in. Here's a way we never looked at before. Why don't we get the fuck out of here where people aren't shooting at us?
I know, but Zionism was so successful in the 40s and the 50s that Israel was built literally into a land of milk and honey.
So let's put the milk and honey in the middle of Borneo. Let's replicate the miracle somewhere else where we're not doing it under the gun. Because in the 40s we had a war of independence to start with, and we had another major war in 56 to survive. And it's gone on ever since. I mean, we're still in the same place we were in 1948 with the entire Muslim world getting their guns aimed at us. And it's only because of the support of the U.S. That we can hold out against it. Because if not, it'd be a goodbye Israel.
But how are you going to make sense of a region where the United States and Saudi Arabia are allies?
Well, that's about oil. One of the ways is to change the energy system.
So, what's going to encourage Israelis to move? Because they not only sit on oil, but they
don't. The Israelis don't have any. Golda Meir is famous for saying we got the only land in the Middle East without oil under it.
That's true. That's true. But you do have good tenants in the United States that have set up bases and what have you, and
so they can use Jordan as their fall guy
and fuel the economy. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an idea. I'm not Abba Ibn and I'm not Ben Gurion, but I had this crazy notion that it all could be very simple in the end.
And believe me, I'm analyzing it, but if you take it as a piece of work, it's beautifully well written and it makes a lot of sense. How about that?
I'm doing the best I can, boss.
All right, my friend. We'll do it again next week. Thank you so much for your company. I appreciate it. Howie Gordon, former playmate, more than just a former playmate, the first playmate. Tell him, Howie.
The first guy in Playgirl magazine photographed with an erection.
All right.
Although a friend of mine in college once said to me, never, speaking of my erection, he said, never has one man gotten so much out of so little.
Very, very good. Hey, by the way, it'll put you in Wikipedia. So, 1,000 years from now, people look up, they'll know Howie Gordon. And
with the magic pee-pee.
Was...
Well, look, it's circumcised. I didn't know he was Irish. Good Shabbos, my friend.
Be well and enjoy your weekend, because I know you live the premise that every day is Sunday and tomorrow's a holiday.
I'm going to be in San Diego for the next 2 weeks. Do you want me to check in with you on Fridays?
Absolutely. Love
okay, I'll try to do that.
We'll talk about the differences between Northern California and Southern California. Make for a good show.
Okay.
Talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back. Adios.